Russia keeps launching missiles and drones at Ukraine's critical energy infrastructure and has already created 3 total blackouts in Ukraine. This meant making Ukraine surrender and presumably negotiate. But we choose to stay cold or dark, but with no Russians. And today we will talk about what solutions we've come to and why this won't help Russia. Hello and welcome, this is the Solutions from Ukraine podcast, which is brought to you by the Rubryka media outlet. My name is Vladyslav Faraponov, I'm the co-host of this podcast and also an analyst at Internews-Ukraine, a Ukrainian media NGO. And I'm joined by my colleague Anastasia Rudenko, who is editor-in-chief of the independent all-Ukrainian Rubryka media outlet. And before we start, let me remind you that you can support us at Patreon. Hello, Nastya.
Hello, Vlad, and to those listening to us. Today we will try to launch our next episode. Try as we hope batteries will be well charged by the end of it.
Yes, and as we are making this episode, Ukraine is still working to restore critical supplies. Actually, 4 days have passed since the November 23 attacks. And right now, for example, it is really an issue to have normal connection and electricity in Ukraine, and for now we do not have electricity, and we are making this podcast in complete darkness, in its real meaning.
Yes, so on the morning of November 24th, the Zaporizhzhia nuclear power plant resumed its operation after another one of the most significant attacks on Ukraine's energy systems. It was the first nuclear power plant, but the Russians controlled it for a long time. This means that another 3 nuclear power plants in Rivne, Pivdennoukrainsk and Khmelnytsky have not been operating at that time. This is probably the first time when all this happened at once.
Yes, and this blackout was not so massive at first glance, but at the same time, I can say that the only difference is that basically the previous week, it targeted not so many civilian infrastructure objects, but at the same time, the most violent attack this week was in Vyshorod, in Kiev region. Almost at the very suburb of Kiev. We'll post the link of our own pictures from there, but the attack was really horrible. So in today's episode, we'll mostly speak about business and how they are adapting to this reality. And it is evident
ordinary
that,
life and people's ordinary life.
Yeah, it is also evident that many retail companies, many networks of malls and others, cafes, restaurants, are welcoming Ukrainians to host them and let them charge phones, laptops, do their work and others. And also it is really important to get some warmth. It suddenly became pretty cold. Actually, not suddenly. I mean, October was pretty warm in Ukraine and the beginning of November too, but this temperature is quite normal for Ukraine during this season. So Russia wants us to live in the cold and darkness, but basically, why now, Nastya? What do you think?
In my view, there are 3 important things to understand in that regard as well. First, Russians even don't deny that they attack energy infrastructure to make Kiev negotiate. Second, these blackouts came after the tremendous success of Ukraine's armed forces in the south, which resulted in the deoccupation of Kherson, the only regional city Russians had controlled since the early days of war.
Yeah, so it's like their revenge for our resilience. But poor and miscalculating indeed. It is also very interesting that Russians claim that it is Ukrainians who actually don't want to negotiate. But one should ask, if Russia intends to negotiate, why does it still attack? And secondly, why it attacks energy infrastructure that targets the connection. Connection networks, electricity, and heat, and water, because Russia wants Ukrainians to panic, perhaps, leave the country, and make our government surrender.
Absolutely. And more essential, in my view, is that businesses, society, and the government are working together right now. It is a feeling of one single mechanism. We have witnessed it such at the very beginning of the war. Ukrainians came up with a slogan: if choosing between no light and no Russians, the answer is obviously the second. So, what about large businesses? What solutions have been found?
I would also add that launching a generator is not easy. It's evident for business, for ordinary people, and you cannot put it inside. It is very important, of course. Not every cafe in Kiev, let's say, can do that technically. Not to mention that it is harder to obtain it in the regions, especially in the regions close to the front. Like they have other stuff to worry about. I imagine my native town Mykolaiv right now, and for some reasons they didn't have such issues with the light, but at the same time they still have Russians actually nearby. So in relatively safe regions, actually, businesses offer clients to get to their places and work in the cafes. For example, Ukraine's largest retail company, which is called Rozetka, it means a plug in Ukrainian, is absolutely okay with people boiling their kettles inside and making steaks, for example. It is the case, like the CEO of the company, he posted this story on Facebook. A woman came and asked if she could put some mincer on the table. Actually, presumably it became dark in her apartment, and she went on a store and perhaps didn't find any other appropriate place. Such stories are very, very common right now, and it's like remarkable example of finding the way out of difficult and at first glance unmanageable situation, perhaps. Also, Ukraine's largest private post company, Nova Poshta, declared that people are welcome. It doesn't matter if they are sending or receiving packages or not, to charge what they need to basically to get some warm and others. Like, to understand basically what is Rozetka and Nova Poshta, it's like Walmart and Meijer in the United States. Those two are very popular and very common. So the major solution, like for businesses, for people, is a generator, as we have mentioned. It is a relatively small machine which provides electricity to the building. It is loud and it needs gas, some oil, as it has an engine. So you can imagine how costly it is for businesses first to purchase it, then have enough gas. And we also should understand that the gas prices actually rose in spring too.
Yes, and we see another problem for business. More people are coming to cafes and restaurants for work. So at first it means seats are occupied. But people do not order many meals, they rather stay. And this leads to other issues too. In particular, people are coming with laptops, charging their cell phones, but they do not purchase too much or as much as they could before. And they sit here for a long time. Let's not forget, when there is an air raid alert, all such businesses should be closed.
Yes, and I would also add that there have been lots of businesses like that in Kiev, in particular, which may be called responsible business from a social point of view. The idea is that businesses should combine profitable activities with activities that benefit the society. And let's say about Kiev, many saw their social mission in that too, but the mission now has been changed to provide light and heating. So it is a problem for some businesses while others can obtain more blankets and other stuff, for example. It sounds strange at first, but it is real. It is the issue that now Ukrainians face every day.
What is more, barbecue-equipped restaurants continue working. The barbecue menu was popular even before the electricity problems, and now it is a real hit. Meat, fish, vegetables, and shawarma on the grill are in great demand. And for example, the Pesto Cafe chain has developed a separate special menu in case of a long-term power outage. It has a variety of salads, meat and cheese sets, pies and cheesecakes, and hot tea while the thermal pot is warm. We will post the link with more stories in the description of how the business operates now.
Yes, and let's not forget about such parts of our daily life. Going to malls is different in Ukraine. Despite the winter, fridges cannot operate forever without electricity, and normal food is wasted. We cannot think about some imaginable number, but we assume it is really a lot.
That is why such companies like ATB, the largest network of supermarkets in Ukraine, have already started preparing for a total blackout. For example, ATB has already purchased 87 generator stations and ordered another 700. It seems that the company should be able to cover all its shops, as they have more than 1,000 malls all over Ukraine.
Yes, but those generators should be powerful enough. And by the way, Lviv and Kyiv Cities Council, they decided to reimburse 50 and 70% respectively of the generator's price for people if they're using them for residential houses. So it means like the local self-government basically decided to provide compensation for people if they're using it and sharing it with others, and not just for their private purposes, which is really wise, I think.
Yes, and the EU has just launched the Generators of Hope campaign to provide Ukraine with power generators. European Parliament's President Roberta Metsola and Dario Nardella, Mayor of Florence and President of Eurocities, and we, of course, call on you, our listeners, to donate too. Some Polish cities have already joined the initiative. If you cannot reach out to your city council, you can donate to us. We are also working on getting a generator for our team, but as we have already mentioned, it needs gas. USAID also delivered 1,000 power generators to keep critical service running in wartime. But of course, the needs of the largest country in Europe are much higher. In the meantime, what has this situation in general taught us?
Well, like in order to answer this, let's take a look at other spheres of life. In Cherkasy, a city close enough to Kyiv, a very challenging surgery on the heart has taken place. And right in the middle of the operation, the lights have been turned off. Against all odds, doctors performed it successfully. The doctors revealed that the surgery of Vasil, who is almost 60 years old, was difficult, and it was necessary to replace part of the aorta. And it is called Bentals operation, and it is one of the most complicated on person's heart. The operation began according to the plan, according to the chair of intensive care, Vadim Golub. The patient's temperature was lowered, his heart was stopped, and then he was connected to artificial blood circulation, a ventilator, and a host of other equipment for instance and control. In total, the operation was lasting almost 7 hours, and right in the middle of it, the lights have been turned off. like it was exactly on the day when Russia launched its recent massive attack on Ukraine's energy infrastructure, and a total blackout in the city has been as a result. The operating room literally plugged into darkness, and Vasil was almost on the brink of death, actually due to Russians. Doctors took their cell phones and turned up their lights. Then a generator was turned on, but again, as we have mentioned, it takes time, at least a couple of minutes. But doctors, they didn't have the capacity to lose such precious time. Such heroic stories are really common in Ukraine. Everyone does his or her job, even if this is a challenge right now. And we also note, joking in some way, that things like getting a cup of coffee are difficult right now in Ukraine. And it takes not only some time, it takes also in some way even courage, and also it is not so easy.
Absolutely. And unfortunately, the media suffers from those blackouts too. We are in Ukraine. Some of us, like literally a few people from our team are abroad, but majority of reporters, all our colleagues, journalists, media organizations need support to continue informing you about the situation. Free media is essential. The only way for us now is to diversify our teams and sources for supplying energy, as this is already becoming the hardest winter in the modern history of Ukraine. But as you understand, generators really bring hope, but it costs a lot. That is why we ask you to become our patron on Patreon and bring our victory closer.
And with no secret, Ukrainians are still inspired to work on the victory, everyone on his or her front.